These gas clouds are in the Large Magellanic Cloud, which is the nearest dwarf galaxy to us. You can actually see this galaxy in the southern hemisphere in the sky if you ever travel to the south. There's this very active star-forming region called 30 Doradus, where a large number of stars are currently being created. But these nebulae are somewhat to the outskirts. They also have young stars in them. But in this case, we can tell from the appearance of the nebulae that the stars that are forming are not quite the same in the two nebulae. The nebula on the right, which is the one that appears red, that nebula is red because the stars that are illuminating it and lighting it up, well, they're not cool, but they're not very hot. When I say not very hot, I mean about 25,000 degrees. Whereas this blue nebula has a much hotter star in its center, and this star is probably about 40 to 50,000 degrees. And because the star is much hotter, that means that it ionizes the gas. It kicks the electrons out of the atoms, and the atoms then radiate, and they radiate in spectral lines. So that means that this nebula is blue because it's emitting most of its radiation in a few lines, which happen to occur in the blue, or in fact the green part of the spectrum. They get their colors because they're lit up by stars. So effectively, the photons from the star are received by the gas. The energy of those photons goes into pumping the atoms into an excited state. And when they're like that, they then lose that energy, mostly as radiation in the visible part of the spectrum. This one on the right, the red one, most of that radiation we see is in the hydrogen alpha line, which is in the red part of the visible spectrum. One of the main reasons we know these stars are so young is actually because they're very hot, and that means they're consuming a huge amount of energy. Now, even a star which is perhaps many tens of times more massive than the sun can't burn up that sort of energy for very long. We know these stars will use up their energy in about 10 million years, which is rather short for a star. I mean, the sun has been around for about 7,000 million years. It's a much lower mass, a lighter star, and so it consumes its gas more slowly, whereas these stars are very young and consuming their gas very, very fast, so they can't live very long.